Hey everyone, it's Kelly from Silly Moon Quilting Co. And today we're going to be talking about charming and using charming to create the perfect spider web with no marking on your Halloween quilts. So anyone that doesn't know, charming is named so because everything about charming works perfectly in a piece charm square. The lines that go through these two holes that we've engraved are 4.5 inches apart exactly. And if you were to stitch around this curve from point A to point B, you would end up perfectly in a 4.5 inch square. Hence we named him Charming. So to do this, I've already pulled up my thread. And I'm simply going to start by creating my grid line. I've done no marking on my quilt for this because we all know I'm not a fan of marking. I'd rather just get on with the stitching. So I've got my sticky tape on my ruler, comes with all of the rulers in the package, and I've got my awful black gloves on because they work better with the camera, and I'm going to hold on to my ruler, my fabric, and move everything as one unit through my machine, gliding it up next against my ruler foot. And here we go. So I'm simply stitching from one needle stop to the other. That's what we're calling this little indentation. I am going to rotate my ruler so that the engraved line going through the hole here is now lined up with this, and this will mean that I am at a nice 90-degree angle. Hold my ruler, and of course, because we're ruler quilting, we can go any direction we want, left, right, forward, back, right? And if you hold that ruler nice and secure, you will be able to stitch over top of the line you just stitched with no problem. So then I'm going to keep working this around, rotating it so that I end up nice and square again the other direction. Ideally, I don't want to turn my quilt because it makes it easier for when you're working on larger quilts, but I'm going to turn this just so that you can see it. So I've lined that line up again with my next line. And I'm going to stitch straight across. And go back the other way. I like this because it's a spider web, so it makes it a nice and heavy line. And then for your benefit, I will turn again. If you're new and you want to turn it, that's fine, but it's a good habit to get into to not turn it if you can do it. I'm going to hold that again, lined up. I'm going to stop when I'm back at my center. Now I decided when I did this before, I want to have some lines on this going at 45 in the center. So not just the 90s, I want to do some 45s. So Charming has some lines that are going to help us do that. You can see there's the lines on Charming. So I'm going to line that up there. And I am going to stitch up to this point. And I'm going to stop. And I'm going to shift my ruler now. Slide it straight along there, keeping my lines lined up, and I'm going to pull it this way so that I know I'm lined up. But the trick about Charming is if you look at this little indentation on the foot here, if this line, the edge of this is lined up right here, is lined up on this seam, then that will make sure that I'm lined up square. Now I don't need to go all the way to the end on this one because I've only gone halfway up or done the full length of Charming on the other parts of the spider web. So I want to then go only up to this point and stop. Keep in mind it's a spider web. And I'm going to stop there when I'm at the center. And then I'm going to come back and shift my ruler down. Make sure I'm lined up on the edge there. And stitch back to my center. And then I'm going to continue doing that all the way around. Although now things get a little bit easier, because if I want to, I'll turn this way so you can see it. Now I want to make sure that I'm stitching a line parallel to that. Oops, wrong side. All I need to do is line up this one through the hole again, and I know I'm going to be square here. So you only need to do the half one once, and then you're back to doing full stops to stops. And I'm back to my center, and then again rotating the other way. You can turn the quilt if you want, not necessary. I'll show you how it works if you don't want to turn it. Back to my center, and then I will turn this last one so you can see what I'm doing. Again, I'm just using that line through the hole to line up so that I know I'm square. I'm holding my fabric taut, holding my ruler flat, and guiding the fabric through my machine and holding that ruler taut. So now I actually want to start my spider web at the top. So one of these lines is going to I'm going to stitch back to the top again. And I find that if I double or triple stitch one line, it's less obvious than if I double stitch one line. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So now all I need to do is I'm going to use this indent again on my ruler foot. And I'm going to go to the 45-degree mark, and I'm going to line that up with my needle. And then I'm going to rotate the ruler until it appears that my needle is going to stop right here. Let me turn this a bit. So I want my needle to stop right here. Now, how do I do that easily without overstepping it? Is I have Dude, which is our little guy that has markings or appendages that are different sizes. So 1/8, 3/4, half, 1/4, and 1. And if I put that 1/4 inch at the edge of that stitching, and I line that up with my ruler, I know I'm going to be pretty darn close to ending up at the top of that. And again, we always have the fudge factor as I teach in my classes. So if you're not quite there, you can adjust as you go around. So I'm simply going to stitch around and stop when I reach the top of that line. I'll show you what that looks like. So I've got my first one there. And I'm going to just continue going around the circle doing exactly the same thing. And you can decide whether or not you want to measure and use, make this perfect. It works a little better if you do, just because the next one then, when we go to line up, it makes it a little bit easier. And just keep stitching around. Probably put this on fast forward so you don't have to keep watching me stitch around a circle. Try to keep the lines about the same on both sides. It will make it a little bit easier for you. Again, remember it's a spider web, and no spider web is perfect, of course. And ideally you want to try and do this so that you're not turning your quilt all the time, but of course I'm doing it so it's easier for you to see. And you want to hold your fabric taut so you don't end up with a big pucker in the middle. Stop there. And keep going all the way around. Oops, myself all tangled up here. So you can see there we've got our first round of our spider web. I'm going to pull those threads out. So that's our first round of our spider web. Now we need to figure out how we're going to offset that spider web to make it look consistent or not. You can choose how consistent you want this to be, but it's pretty easy to do actually, and this is how we're going to do it. So I've got my first arc there. Now I want to continue that same arc going down that way. And if you're really particular about this and you want it to be absolutely perfect, you could go ahead and mark lines through here and just continue using this center line to line up all the way down. Okay, so I would stitch down here to the next distance. I can determine whatever distance I want there. And then I can use, if I want, I can put a marked line down the center using your marking pen, and then you'll know that each one of them is exactly the same as the one beside it, which works out nice for managing how far you want to go. So I'm just going to pick a random distance here, and I'm going to do a little bit of stitching down this arm. And let's see, let's go a little further for the purposes of the video. As I'm doing this, I have a couple options for lining up. I could use spacey and decide exactly how far apart. This is a spider web, so I want it to be kind of close. So again, if you want this to be perfect in the center, you can draw a line that goes straight through there, through each of these sections, and that will make sure you're perfectly lined up. I'm going to just choose markings that are on the ruler. And I've chosen to use the second engraved line. So you'll see there's 3 here. And where that intersects with the center line, so I've got my center line here and center line there. I'm going to choose that line, and then I'm going to look at the side where these 2 lines intersect. Am I pretty close to where they intersect on the same spacing on either side? And I am, and that is going to be just fine for a spider web. Like I said, if you want to measure it all out and mark it, you can absolutely do that. I'm not going to do that for this video because this is going to work just fine. I'm going to stop there. Then I'm going to rotate my ruler and I'm going to line up in the same position, moving it so that it's touching my ruler foot, and you may need to adjust a little bit. Come up half a stitch there. And stop when I reached my stitch line, and then just continue going around. So you're going to pick a spot that works for you. Whatever works for you, whatever you like as far as your center. Kind of try to make sure that your center line is pointing towards the center. It'll make things line up a little bit better. So now we've come back to the point where we've got double lines there, and then you can determine how far apart. Like I said, you can determine how far apart you want these by different markings or by marking out down this line, whichever works for you. We're just doing a rough one here, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to stitch down that line that I stitched on. And I'm going to use the same marking on that one. So I'm going to go a little bit further. And where those 2 lines intersect is where I'm going to be, and I want to make sure that my center line is pretty centered there. I can eyeball that, and you can totally, like I said before, you can mark that out if you really want to do that. And then I'm just going to continue going around again. of liking that. I think I'll probably go one more in. Yeah, let's do one more in. So you can see how that's coming together nicely and that the spacing is all the same. And that's not by doing any serious or any marking really. I'm just using the markings that are on the ruler to give me that effect. So I'm going to stitch down my ditch there again, or down my seam, and you can stop at a different one if you want. That will make it so it's not so heavy looking. And I want my spacing to be about the same. So I'm going to stop there. Again, I'm making sure my center line is pointing towards the center, holding my ruler, stopping there. And I'm just doing it this way to show you how you can do this so that you're, I guess it's harder for you to see, so I'll rotate it this way. And once you get fast at these and get good practice, it goes really quickly because of course you don't have to be super precise. It is a spider web after all. But you can make it as accurate or as kind of wonky, I guess, as you choose. But super quick to decorate. And if you saw my spider web without a ruler, you would know that there's a reason that I use rulers. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to end up where I started. I'm just going to break my thread there. And there we go. So that's how, using the charming ruler, you can end up with a perfect spider web really quickly with no marking. So I hope you enjoyed that video. If you do, give us the thumbs up down below, subscribe, and tell your friends. That would be great. Happy Halloween.